Hi guys, Ben Parsons here on the Movie More channel. What I want to do today is a top 10 list of films directed by Clint Eastwood. I'm going to start from 10 and move all the way up to 1. Obviously 1 being my favourite Clint Eastwood film. And please let me know down below what your comments are on my list. If you think that I should have added a different film or should have taken off one of the films because you don't think it's good enough to be on the list. So please comment down below and I will get back to you. And let's get started with the top 10 Clint Eastwood films. Okay, so the first film on the list at number 10 is A Perfect World. It was filmed in 1993, so it's quite an old film, and it stars Clint Eastwood and Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner stars as Butch, a convict who's in prison, and he escapes with it's not a friend, but it's obviously another convict. They escape together, the two of them escape, who's called Jerry. And what they do is, after escaping, they realise that their only chance of getting away and crossing the border is to take a hostage. So as they're driving past the house, they see a young boy, a 9-year-old boy called Philip, and they stop and they grab him. Okay, they put him in the car. And the idea is, they're in Texas, is to try and cross the border before Clint Eastwood, who stars as the chief of police, Red Garnett, catches them. But before, obviously, they get too far, there's an argument between the two convicts, and something happens, and they split up. And Kevin Costner continues on his journey towards the border with Philip, the boy. Kevin Costner quickly realizes that he hasn't ever celebrated Halloween or Christmas or been able to do a lot of things that other kids do. So he sort of becomes very close to the child, and he starts buying him a few things and giving him a few perks that he's never had in his life. I think one of the things he does is he buys a Casper the Friendly Ghost costume, which the kid loves, and he puts on, so he's never been able to do any of these things. And basically the film is about Kevin Costner and the child's relationship and how they become really close. So yeah, the film's very simple. Clint Eastwood trying to catch Kevin Costner before he crosses the border, and Kevin Costner, having a growing relationship with a young boy while he's trying to escape. Now, the film's really good. I really enjoyed it. Kevin Costner plays the part really well. Clint Eastwood, as always, he's really good, and obviously playing a policeman here, the tough guy. I really, really enjoyed it, and there's at the end of the film, obviously there's a surprise ending, so I won't tell you about that, but a really good film, 1993, and a great duo of actors in this film. Okay, the next film on the list is The Bridges of Madison County. It was filmed in 1995, only 2 years after A Perfect World. It also stars Clint Eastwood, but it stars Meryl Streep too. And basically they form a duo in this film. And Meryl Streep is a woman called Francesca, who's obviously a housewife at this time. It's set in 1965. She's a typical housewife. She has children and a husband. And I think during a week in summer, her husband and her children go off to a state fair, and she's left at home on her own. And Clint Eastwood, who's a photographer, he works for the National Geographic, one day knocks on the door. And he's looking for some bridges in the county because he wants to do some photos of some bridges. He's looking for a bridge called the Roseman Bridge. And he gets talking to Meryl Streep, and she gets quite interested in this photographer and his job and things. And finally, she decides to take him to the bridge. And while she's taking him to the bridge, and he's taking photos of the bridge and these things, they sort of start a relationship. And she falls in love with him, and he falls in love with her, and they literally have a 4-day love affair, which ends after 4 days. But the film isn't set in this time. It's actually set in the present, where Meryl Streep's children, who found out after their lawyers read a will, they find a key to a hope chest that Meryl Streep has, or Francesca has, and they open it up and they find loads of information about Clint Eastwood. I didn't say his name in the film is Robert. And literally they didn't know anything about it, but they find out that she was madly in love with this man, that she only stayed with him for 4 days, and that he had previously died and his ashes had been scattered over Roseman Bridge, and that she had written journals about her 4 days with Robert, and in these journals she was explained that she would love her ashes scattered on the same bridge, Roseman Bridge. So the film obviously follows the children reading her journals about these 4 days of Meryl Streep's love affair with Clint Eastwood, and they have to sort of come to a decision to decide whether they are going to bury their mum next to their real father, or they're going to grant her wishes and scatter her ashes along with the ashes that were scattered, Clint Eastwood over the Rosemary Bridge. So, it's a really typical, love film, traditional film. Great acting, obviously, from Clint Eastwood and Meryl Streep. Really interesting film. I was hooked all the way through. And yeah, it's just saying, also the conundrum that the children have there. They didn't know anything about this love affair that happened years and years before. And it's really interesting to see them read this book, and they obviously show you through the film the love affair and things that happen between the mother and Clint Eastwood, who's Robert. And a really interesting film, really enjoyed it. Okay, now the next film on the list is Invictus, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. Obviously, recently Nelson Mandela died, and this film is based on Nelson Mandela, so I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. I know that particularly in my country, they've been showing it quite a lot on the TV because he died recently, and as soon as someone important dies, they sort of bring out the films that are about them. And it's a recent film. It was filmed in 2009, and it stars Matt Damon, and it also stars Morgan Freeman as Nelson Mandela. And basically, Nelson Mandela obviously is not in prison anymore, and he wants to make South Africa stronger, and he has a lot of economic problems, but he also has a lot of racial problems. And what he wants to do is try and unite as many blacks and whites together as he can. And one of the things that he believes believes that can help him do this is sport. And as he has a great love for the game of rugby, and in this year, which is set in 1995, the Rugby World Cup is set in South Africa, and they have a free pass to get into the World Cup. He decides that if he can do it through his South African team, try and join the black people and the white people through sport, it would be a great opportunity. And what he does is he meets with the captain of the rugby team, who's played by Matt Damon. And the film's basically about the rugby team's fight in the World Cup, trying to get to the final. And Nelson Mandela's, agreements with the captain of the rugby team, and also the problems that are happening in the country at the time, and how he tries to deal with them, and how he tries to bring black people and white people together. So it's a really interesting film, obviously very political, but there's sport in it as well, so it's a film for a lot of people. It's very interesting, and I really enjoyed it after I saw it. I was really, really happy with Matt Damon's performance. He puts on quite a good South African accent for me, and yeah, Morgan Freeman, as always in this film, played a great role, and he's played presidents many times, or presidents of America, but it's the first time obviously he's played Nelson Mandela, and he does it really well. I really enjoyed the film, and if you haven't seen it, please check that one out. Okay, the next film on the list, which is number 7, is a very recent film, one of Clint Eastwood's last films, which is Hereafter, which was filmed in 2010. It was 3 or 4 years ago. And it stars, again, Matt Damon. But this time we have another actress. I didn't know her before the film. She's a French actress who's called Cécile de France. And what the film is basically about, it's about 3 different people. At the start of the film, they show them separately. But as the film goes through and continues, their lives sort of come together, and it's all about, basically the film is about death in general. And the 3 different people have got 3 different aspects on death, and they come together at the end of the film. And the ending of the film, I'm not going to tell you, but it's a nice end of the film after such accounts of death and problems that people have had through their lives. When they come together at the end of the film, and there's a happy ending. And basically the 3 different parts of the film, we have Matt Damon, who's an authentic psychic, but he believes that it's a problem. He's not a psychic that wants to make money out of it. He is literally psychic, and he believes he's haunted. So he doesn't really like the power he has, but he is a psychic. And then obviously Cécile de France is a French reporter, and she's on holiday, and she's caught up in the tsunami, and she has a near-death experience there, which changes her life and brings her a lot closer to death. And then the third part is a young 9-year-old child, and he lives in London, and he has a twin, and his twin tragically dies in an accident, and obviously it brings him a lot closer to death. So, with the young guy, the young child in London, and Cécile de France, who's had a near-death experience, they want to understand death a lot more, and things that happen through the film, they bring them together with Matt Damon, who's obviously a psychic, and they want to try and understand more about death, or connect with their loved ones that have already died, and they want to try and do that through Matt Damon. And obviously Matt Damon, who doesn't like the power he has, he doesn't want to use it much, but he feels forced into using it to help some people. And the film's really good, really well done. The first scene, obviously, with the tsunami is spectacular. I really enjoyed that. But after the film, you're really intrigued to see what happens to these people. You start believing things that maybe you didn't believe before, and about death and things like that. And one of the main parts of the film that I really enjoyed is that that Matt Damon isn't as he always is in typical films, with action or sport and things. He's an introvert. He doesn't speak to many people. He's very closed-minded around other people. But obviously, he has a lot of wisdom. He knows a lot of things about the world, about life, and about death. And his role in the film is really interesting. So if you haven't seen this film, just for the first scene of the tsunami, I'm sure you've seen the adverts or the trailers for it. It's really good intro into the film. And Clint Eastwood's, once again, he's done a really good film. And if you haven't seen this, take a look. Okay, the next film on the list, coming in at number 6, is Letters from Iwo Jima. And it's quite a recent film. It was filmed in 2006. And my personal genre of films is war films. So for me, being a war film and obviously being directed by Clint Eastwood, I love this film. And it's not a typical war film. It's obviously about Second World War, but it's set on an island in the middle of the South Pacific. And the Japanese control this island. And they realize, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, that the Americans are going to want this island because strategically it's in a position in the middle of the South Pacific that's, it's got a lot of advantages. If you can have control of this island, you can have a military base. So the Imperial Japanese Army sent forces to the island, which previously is uninhabited, to prepare the island for attack and to obviously defend it from the invading Americans. One thing why I said the film is different to other war films, because it's 90% of the film, is set with Japanese actors, and they speak in Japanese, and you have the subtitles and things. But they have got a really good Japanese actor, which is Ken Watanabe. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I've spoken about him before in other films. He doesn't only do Japanese films, he does a lot of American films. He starred in Memoirs of a Geisha, The Last Samurai, Origin, with Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's also going to star in the new Godzilla movie, the reboot. So he's a really good actor. I really enjoyed the film. And basically, the plot of the film, obviously, as I said, is the Americans coming to invade the island, and the Japanese have to prepare the island for attack and defend it. But you follow the general, Kuyobayashi, or something like that, I think his name is. I'm sorry if my Japanese pronunciation isn't very good. It was obviously played by Ken Watanabe. He's the general in control of the forces on the island. And then we have another part is a Japanese soldier who, while he was at home, was a baker. And literally he's not forced into it because it's supposed to be an honor for the Japanese soldiers to fight for Japan. But, they tell him, okay, you can fight for Japan. And he sort of says, oh, great, yeah, great. But he's really young. He obviously doesn't have any experience. So what we have is these two parts, a general who's got a lot of experience, who knows American, who's been in America, he knows sort of the military tactics. And then we have another guy, or boy in this case, who he doesn't know anything about fighting. He's really scared. He doesn't know what's going to happen. So we've got these sort of two different aspects of the military life on this small island, while the Japanese are obviously waiting for attack. And as you can imagine, the film is, it's really intriguing. Part of the film is obviously preparing you, explaining you about the World War and what's happening and why the island is important and things. And then you obviously have the invasion, the American invasion, where there's a lot of action and really interesting. So a really good war film, really enjoyed it, and yeah, if you like war films, you're going to love this, and if you like Clint Eastwood films, you've got to check this one out. Great film. Okay, so we're down to the top 5, and in the 5th position is a really good film, a film I really enjoyed. The last 5 films are really difficult for me to sort of put in order because I love them so much, is $1 Million Baby. Okay, it was filmed in 2004, and it won an Oscar for Best Picture, and Clint Eastwood also won Best Director, and Oscar for Best Director. And obviously, I don't know if you've seen it, it's about boxing. It stars Clint Eastwood, who's Frankie, who owns a gym. And he's quite famous throughout the boxing world. He trains a lot of famous boxers. He's a professional trainer and obviously quite famous in boxing. And basically, he's a bit of a loner. He spends his whole day training people, training boxers and things like that. And apart from that, he doesn't have much else. He has his gym and the person he's training. And a few years beforehand, he had an argument with his daughter and he doesn't speak to her. So he's a bit of a loner. The only friend he's got is Morgan Freeman, who's called Scrap in the film, who's like a guy that looks after things in Frankie's gym, you know, cleans up and cleans the toilets and things like that. But obviously it's the only friend he has. And basically the film is about Frankie, who's set on training this young fighter who's got a lot of potential. But what he doesn't want to do, he doesn't want the fighter to try and get to the top too soon. What he actually does is he holds the young fighter back, and obviously the young fighter decides to leave Frankie and go to another trainer who's going to offer him a chance at the title. So Frankie's left on his own in his gym. He doesn't know what to do. And one day a girl, obviously played by Hilary Swank, joins the gym, and she wants Frankie to train her, but obviously he doesn't want to train women, you know, he's used to training men, you know, he's a very traditional man. But after he sees that he hasn't got any trainers to help and things like that, he finally agrees to help Maggie. And basically the film is about him training Maggie and Maggie going up through the ranks and getting better, and obviously in her boxing and in her career. And obviously a lot of things happen during this period of training and going up through the ranks. And I don't want to tell you any more because I don't want to give the story away. But you know, it's a really good boxing film, really interesting. Obviously, you don't have many boxing films about women, but Hilary Swank plays the part really well. Really enjoyed her part in this. There were a lot of Oscars given to this. Obviously, I said there were Best Picture and Best Director, but Hilary Swank also won Oscar for Best Director. Morgan Freeman won an Oscar for Supporting Actor. And, you know, these three together, really good film. I really enjoyed it. And, you know, you've really got to check this out. I always keep saying you've got to check these films out, but this is one you've really got to watch because something happened in the film that, you know, it's really interesting and it makes you think a lot. And, yeah. Great film, $1 Million Baby. Okay, the next film on the list is Changeling. It didn't have very good reviews when it came out. You know, it didn't have bad reviews, but you know, it wasn't one of the typical Clint Eastwood films that people went mad over. But I personally enjoyed it, and it stars Angelina Jolie as Christine Collins. Okay, and personally, I think she played this part perfectly. I've never seen a film like this. You know, I think just beforehand she did Mr. and Mrs. Smith, so it was a huge action film. So you know. It was strange to see her in a film like this. She plays a mum in, you know, I think it's in the 40s. They're in the 40s, and she works in a telephone exchange company. You know, where beforehand you had to ring the company, and they sort of physically connected you. You couldn't just ring a person straight through. And one day she has to work a bit later. I think it's on a Saturday. And when she finally gets home, it's after dark. She gets home, and she finds that her 9-year-old son Walter isn't at home. And she's not married, you know, she hasn't got a husband, so Walter was at home on his own, and she looks through the streets and asks children, you know, have you seen Walter? And she finally realises that he has actually gone missing. So she files a report with the LA police department and things like that. But days go by, weeks go by, and they can't find this child. And, you know, after, you know, quite a long while of searching for this child, Walter, the LA police department start getting, you know, criticised because they're not doing enough and things like that. So one day they call Christine Collins and they tell her that they found her son, and she's ecstatic. She runs to the train station because they're saying that they're bringing him here by train, and when the kid gets off the train, she looks at him. It's not a kid, but the LA police department are there with the cameras, and they sort of make it saying, look, don't say anything. It's your child. It's your child. You must be in shock. You must be in shock. He's changed. He's been away for so long. He's lost weight and things like that. So literally, because everyone's sort of in her face, she sort of says, oh yeah, she gives him a kiss and hugs him, but when she takes him home, she knows it's not her own kid. And basically the story from there is Christine Collins or Angelina Jolie's fight to try and prove that this isn't her son, and the LA police have sort of fobbed her off giving her a child that's not hers. And the only person that actually listens to her is a pastor, and our pastor Gustav, who's played by a personal favourite actor of mine, which is John Malkovich, and he's the only one that, you know, he's criticising the police department, and he goes on her side and he tries to help her. Now, while the film is sort of playing out, there is a separate section of the film where there's a policeman who has to investigate a an isolated ranch. And he has to investigate it because there's been signs of a child there who is illegally in America. He's come from Canada and he doesn't have the proper documentation. And what he does is he goes to the ranch to find this kid, and he finds that everything's not as it seems on this ranch. And the story relates to the problems that Christine Collins is having, and they find out a lot of interesting things on this ranch that could actually help her out. So the film follows her looking for a son, and on the side a separate story with a child that's in a ranch, and they find out that something's happened on this ranch and it's actually connected to what's happened to Christine Collins' child. So a really interesting film. It's sorry, not an action film, but it's set in the 1940s. You know, it's really well done. All the sets are well done. You've got the old 1940s cars and you know, the way they dress and things like that. John Malkovich plays the pastor, the reverend, so does a really good job in that. And obviously it's just sort of showing how the police department in these times sort of were very corrupt and they could do what they want. And it's just, you know, criticising the police department and how society has been used by the police, and things have been hidden. But, you know, eventually one person stands out, which is Angelina Jolie, and she wants to fight back. And it's a really interesting film. And if you haven't seen it, you know, it's really heartwarming. And no, I really recommend this film. Okay, number 3, we have a film that was really difficult for me to put at number 3. You know, at first I said, oh, this is definitely number 1, and then I said, no, I'm going to move it to number 2. In the end, on the list I put it at number 3, and it's Unforgiven. Okay, and it's the oldest film directed by Clint Eastwood on the list. It was directed in 1992, a year before A Perfect World, and it won an Oscar for Best Picture, and once again Clint Eastwood won Best Director. Okay, and it's got 3 main characters. Clint Eastwood obviously starts in the film. Then we also have Morgan Freeman, once again, as you can see, Morgan Freeman's in a lot of Clint Eastwood films. And we also have Gene Hackman. And basically it's set in the West, you know, in the typical cowboy era. And it's set in a town called Big Whiskey. And it's a normal town, you know, they obviously have cowboys that come and go and people that work there. And there is actually a brothel. And one night some cowboys come in and they go into the brothel. And one of the cowboys is not happy with a comment that one of the prostitutes gives him, and literally takes out a knife and he sort of slashes her face and then cuts her up a bit. So they arrest him, and Gene Hackman, who plays the sheriff in the town, deals with it in his own way. He thinks he's given justice, but the women, the prostitutes from the brothel, they don't believe that he's done enough. So what they do is they collect all their money together and they put a bounty on the cowboy's head. And there's a young kid who calls himself the Schofield Kid. He thinks that he can come and he can kill these 2 cowboys and collect the money, but he doesn't want to do it on his own. So what he does is he calls in on Clint Eastwood, who is a famous outlaw that recently has left crime and got married and had children. He's left all his crime behind and he wants to live a normal life. But his wife recently died. He doesn't have a lot of money, so when this kid comes to him and offers him a partnership to go and kill these cowboys, he takes up the offer, and he goes to Big Whiskey to try and to kill these cowboys to collect the bounty. But Morgan Freeman, as I said, starts in the film, and when Clint Eastwood was an outlaw, his partner in crime was Morgan Freeman. So what he says to the kid is, he said, right, I'll go and help you, but we've got to stop by and get my old partner, Morgan Freeman, who plays Ned, otherwise I'm not going to do it. So the 3 join together, and the film's literally about them going to the town of Big Whiskey to try and collect the bounty, killing these 2 cowboys. But what they don't expect is there are other cowboys that want to kill the same people, as well as Gene Hackman, who's the sheriff, who wants to stop them killing the cowboy, because he believes that he's already served justice. So it's a really good cowboy film. Obviously, it's not like the typical John Wayne films, but it's really well directed. Obviously, you've got 3 great actors in there, and you know, it's really interesting to see how Clint Eastwood sees you know, the way westerns are done when he directs them. Obviously, starring in quite a few westerns himself and film very similar films like that. And if you love westerns, you're going to love this, and it's just a really, really good film. Okay, number 2, Mystic River. A great film filmed in 2003, about 10 years ago. And this film has an all-star cast. We've got Sean Penn, who stars as Jimmy, who actually won an Oscar for Best Actor. We also have Laura Linney, Lawrence Fishburne, who was obviously, if you don't know who Lawrence Fishburne is, was Morpheus in The Matrix. We've got Kevin Bacon, who plays Sean and is a police detective. And then we've got Tim Robbins, who won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, who plays Dave Boyle. Okay, and the film's a bit complicated. When I saw it the first time, I enjoyed it obviously, but it wasn't until the second time I saw it that I started, seeing and understanding the whole film. So it's one of these films that if you see it 2 times, it's better than if you see it once. And basically, it's about 3 kids, Sean, Jimmy, and Dave, who are playing street hockey one day, and 2 men stop in a car and they pose as policemen and they take Dave away. And they abduct him and they sexually abuse him over several days. And he finally escapes, and from then on the film jumps forward into when they are adults, but obviously Dave is still haunted from his childhood experience, the bad things that happened to him. And obviously there are these 3 friends that were great friends. They've separated a bit. Sean, who is played by Kevin Bacon, is a police detective. Tim Robbins is like I think he's a stay-at-home dad, or he works in a factory or something, and he has his own child. And then we have Sean Penn, who plays Jimmy, who owns I think it's a corner shop, a street corner shop, but he has a lot of influence in the community. Not good influence, bad influence. Sort of like a mafia type guy who controls a lot of things, and obviously people know that they have a lot of respect for him, but he's not obviously totally legal in what he does. And one day his daughter is found in the park and she's been killed. And so this is when the 3 all come back together. Dave Boyle, played by Tim Robbins, is the main suspect. Jimmy, obviously being the father, and obviously sort of a bully or a mafia type man in the area. He wants to find out who it was, and he's trying to beat the police to it, and he's pushing the police. You got to do more and things like that. And obviously Sean, who's played by Kevin Bacon, is the police detective who has to investigate it. So they come back after years of not really being together. And the film is sort of a mix of emotions, and they don't know who's killed Jimmy's daughter, and they don't know why they can't find him. And Kevin Bacon's stuck in the middle between trying to do his job and also being pressured by his old friend Jimmy. And it's a really interesting film. As I said, I had to watch it 2 times to understand it completely, because the first time I missed a lot of things. I understood the film, but I missed a lot of things. And it's a really interesting film. Obviously got great actors. Lawrence Fishburne is Sean or Kevin Bacon's partner, and you got Laura Linney, who's Jimmy, Sean Penn's wife, and they all play a really nice role, a really great role together, and it's an interesting film. And if you like suspense, and if you like thrillers, and you like the films that come together at the end, through the whole film you're not sure what's happening, and right at the end it sort of all comes to light, you're going to really like this film, Mystic River. Okay, so if you are a fan of Clint Eastwood, I'm sure you know which film is going to be my number 1. It's Gran Torino. Okay, and this is quite a recent film. It was filmed in 2008. And there's not an all-star cast. The main actor is Clint Eastwood. And there are other actors, obviously, but they're not very famous. So it's literally a film directed by Clint Eastwood, starred 100% by Clint Eastwood. And that's why I like it so much. And basically, it's about Clint Eastwood, obviously, who's called Walt Kowalski, I think, and he's a Korean War veteran. He's a typical American. Loves his country, and he doesn't like all the immigrants that are coming to his country and creating gangs and causing crime. But the area in which he lives is, it's an area which is changing. And bit by bit, all of the traditional American people are moving out to different areas, and all of the immigrants and foreign people are moving in. But he's lived in his house his whole life, and he doesn't want to move. He sort of creates, he believes that his house is his fortress that he has to defend. He has a, American flag and things like that. And literally, he's left on his own, the only American on the street. All the rest are, Asian people, and I think his next door neighbours are Hmongs. I think I pronounced that correctly. The race is Hmong. And he has problems, social problems with everyone. He doesn't get along with his own children. He doesn't get along with his nephews or nieces. His wife's died, so he's literally on his own in his house, and he treats it as his castle, and he has to protect it. Sits on his porch, drinking beer, and he's sort of watching all the people go past and controlling everything. And one day there's a problem with his next door neighbours. I told you that they were Hmongs, I think I pronounced that correctly, the race. And they have an argument or something happens and they step onto his lawn. So he goes down to say, you know, get off my lawn. And a couple of days later, the same guy that stepped on his lawn, he finds him in his garage. And the problem is, in his garage, Walt Kowalski of Clint Eastwood has his prized possession. His prized possession is a 1972 Gran Torino car, and this kid is trying to steal it. So he gets really angry and he grabs him, and what he finds out that the kid is actually quite a nice kid, and he was doing it because his cousin, who was in a gang, was forcing him to do it. And so what he does is he takes this kid who's called Tao under his wing, and he sort of feels that he has to protect him from his cousin who's trying to force him into the gang and force him to do other things. So the film obviously is about the relationship that Clint Eastwood has with Tao and how he wants to protect him, and also his sister, Tao's sister. And yeah, it's a really interesting film. You know, it shows, you know, a lot of cultural differences and how you know, stubborn old American men, they don't want to change, and they feel that they have to, you know, protect everything that's American because these invading foreign people are trying to destroy everything. So, you know, he's an old man, a grumpy old man, a Korean War veteran. But, you know, he plays the part really well. Once again, like Clint Eastwood would love to do a surprise ending at the end of the film, so I'm not going to explain that to you. But really good film to watch. If you like Clint Eastwood, this film is 100% Clint Eastwood. That's my favourite Clint Eastwood film. So I hope you enjoyed the list, the top 10 Clint Eastwood films. If you have seen them all, if you haven't seen them all, please tell me down below. Tell me if you think that a film that I haven't spoken about should be on the list. And any comments, I will get back to you. And if you like the video, please click on like. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, click that button.